Hello, Lute friends. Today I wanted to talk to you guys about how to buy your first lute. So um, I wanted to go from cheapest to most expensive options for how you can get into lute playing, talk about some considerations, some things to avoid, some things to look for, and then list all of the different sellers and marketplaces that are good places and bad places to look for lutes. So yeah, without further ado, I would say first thing is you want to know what kind of lute you want to get. So for solo playing, there's a choice between Baroque and Renaissance lutes, and medieval lutes, I guess, depending on the kind of music you want. And I'm going to focus on Renaissance lutes because that's what my expertise is. So this is if you're interested in music from the Renaissance, the 16th century, 15th to 17th century, if you kind of expand it out a bit. Renaissance lutes, a couple of the different variables is the string length and the number of courses. So the kind of standard string length for a lute is about 60 centimeters. 58 to 63, 64 is kind of about the standard range for that. These are lutes that you can tune to G, which is the most common tuning. At 63, you're probably safe to tune it to G. Any higher or lower than that, you're probably going to want a higher or lower tuning, which might make it difficult to play with other people if that's interesting to you. So that's called a tenor lute. So the next consideration is the number of courses. So a course, as I've said before, is either a pair of strings that are tuned to the same note, or in the case of the top string, a single string. And you play a course like as though it's a single string. So Renaissance lutes range from 6 and then stretching it up to about 10 courses. I would say the main consideration for how many courses to get comes down to the kind of repertoire you're interested in. So 6 courses is kind of the earliest type of Renaissance lute. So this would be music from the early to mid 16th century. A lot of Italian music like Francesco da Milano, Spinacino, Marco dall'Aquila. These Italian composers were almost all for 6-course lute. John Dowland and music from the English golden age of the lute around 1600. Dowland probably played a 7-course lute for most of his career based on the way things were written down. So a 7-course lute is good for playing Dowland. An 8-course lute is also useful for Dowland because then sometimes you don't need to fret the 7th course. Instead, you can just play the 7th course that's tuned to F. So if you're not sure what kind of repertoire you would be playing, I would say 7 courses is probably your best bet. You can play the earlier Italian stuff. You can play Dowland without a problem. Above 7 courses or above 8 courses, that's when you're getting into kind of early to mid 17th century music. Ballet, French music like that, you're going to have 9 and 10 courses. So I'm not really interested in that music, so I have no reason to go above 7 or 8. So that's the number of courses. One other consideration to think about a little bit is whether you want a left-handed or a right-handed lute. Really, the only reason you might want a left-handed lute is if you've already learned to play the left-handed guitar. If you're left-handed, don't think that means you need a left-handed lute, because basically both hands are equally hard. In fact, I would say the left hand is, playing the left hand on a normal right-handed lute is probably the harder of the hands. So you being left-handed, getting a left-handed lute has no advantage unless you're already proficient in a left-handed guitar. So with all of those variables in consideration, number of courses, string length, left to right-handed, let's go into different price points where you can get a lute. So the absolute cheapest way you can get into playing lute music is to do it on a classical guitar. I have a video about that. I bought when I got into lute music, I bought a classical guitar from a thrift shop for $30. You could get a new one that's playable for 100, 150 kind of things. And that will definitely get you started. You can go for a long time, and some people go forever playing Renaissance music on a guitar. But if you want an actual lute, I have some firsthand. There's about 3 or 4 different sellers who offer kind of semi-mass-produced, relatively affordable lutes. I have firsthand experience with 3 out of the 4 that I know of, and or 3 out of the 5, I guess, thinking about all of them. So the out of them, so I'll kind of start with the ones that I like. So the first one that I like in terms of relatively affordable lutes is Muzikkon. I'll put a link in the description. Muzikkon lutes are about $500 for this treble lute, and about $800 for a full-size kind of G lute. So this treble lute, it's got 54 centimeter string length, and it's tuned to A, so it's tuned higher than a standard lute. The main downsides of this are that you really need to have smaller fingers to be able to play it kind of comfortably. And your fingers will be quite cramped if you have large fingers like me. This is actually the lute I bought for my son for Christmas. It's a lovely instrument, really good craftsmanship and attention to detail. The action is great, the string spacing is great, and those are the most important aspects for making a lute playable for a beginner. I think the other important aspect for a beginner is pegs that turn smoothly, and this definitely has those. I put a little bit of peg paste on them, but they turn smoothly. They're kind of well-machined pegs. The main place where you'll see a difference between this and a kind of entirely handmade lute, this has looks like a laser cut rose. If it's focusing, yeah, a laser cut rose. It's also got this really nice kind of laser cut design on the back. So if you've got small hands, $500, and you can get a real lute that will put a big smile on your face. If you need a bigger one, I assume that the $800 full-size models are just as good. I've read some good things online. There's one YouTuber who demos all of their lutes, and they all look great and sound great on that. So Muzikkon, that would be my top recommendation for kind of starter lutes. The other kind of affordable option that I would recommend is the Early Music Shop. It's an English seller. Their lutes come out to about $1,100, $1,200, and they are also very nice. I wouldn't say they were any better than the Muzikkon one that I've played, the EMS one. I wouldn't say it's any better than this, but I think it does have a hand carved rose. So if that's important to you, so that's another good option. In terms of the manufacturers or the sellers that I would not recommend, one of all is this eBay seller from Turkey called Sandi. That's the last name of the luthier. And I got one of those lutes because there was one person, I read some things from one person on Facebook that they were good, and I've actually had 2 of their lutes. The first of their lutes that I had been fixed by a much better luthier. So they'd redone the nut, redone the bridge, redone the pegs, and it was actually a very nice lute, and I kind of miss it. It was my first lute. But in terms of what you get off the shelf directly from them, I got another one thinking I would get something similar, and it was not a very good lute. I had to do a lot of modifications, like I had to drill new holes in the bridge, replace all the frets, replace all the strings, kind of resand all the pegs, and even then it was just not a very nice lute to play. So I would not recommend the Sandi lutes from eBay. Another one that I would not recommend, so that's the only one that I've got my hands on of the ones I don't recommend. Another one is Roosebeck. They sell on Amazon, and I've heard a lot of negative things about them in the community. I've heard a couple positive things, but mostly negative things about Roosebeck, so I would avoid them as well. The last kind of affordable seller I would avoid is Thomann. It's a Greek seller, and for them it's not because of the quality of the lutes, but it's because of their business practices. Thomann basically stole the designs from Le Lute Doré, which is a French seller, and they're basically selling those original designs from Le Lute Doré, kind of undercutting their prices. So those are all of the kind of relatively high volume sellers of lutes that I'm aware of, and out of those, Muzikkon is the most affordable that I would recommend. Early Music Shop, a bit more expensive, also recommend. Other option for getting into a lute relatively affordably, is the Lute Society of America has a lute rental program. You have to make a 12-month commitment on the rental, and it comes out to something like $600 a year. So it is a bit more affordable than buying a Muzikkon lute, and you also space the payments out over 12 months. So if that will enable you to get into lutes, then great. The other advantage they have is that they are, really high quality lutes that they rent out, and they're well maintained, and so you will definitely get a really nice lute that you can play for a year. But the downside is at the end of the year, you don't have a lute and you need to return it or renew the rental and then go buy another lute. So that was never appealing to me. It might be appealing to some people. So that's the other option. Beyond that, one way you can sometimes find affordable good lutes is on the Lute Society of America Lutes for Sale page. This is where, individual owners of lutes who want to sell them will list their lutes for sale. You get, it's hit or miss, you get a variety of price points, variety of lutes. There's some really nice ones on there. There's some kind of slightly sketchy looking ones on there, mostly nice though. And every once in a while, a really affordable, nice looking student lute will come up on that. So if you have patience and want to, keep checking that over the course of several months, you might find a good option there. You might find a great option there. Then beyond that, you get kind of into these sort of handmade by single maker kind of lutes. In my last video, I gave you the tour of this lute of mine, which is in that category. This was, several $1,000s. And handmade lutes, by a single maker, probably when you get them new, range from about $2,000, $2,500 up to about $8,000. So the other thing is, if you want to buy it from an individual maker, is that a lot of them have wait lists. So you'd have to get onto their wait list. Some of them have several months, several of them have a couple of years, some of them have over a decade long wait lists if you want, some of the most coveted makers in the world. So that's an option you can get on their lists. Also, these handmade lutes come up a lot on the Lute Society of America Lutes for Sale page. That's where I found this. That's where I've sold lutes. It's a great place if your budget is maybe over $1,500 to $2,000 to look for lutes, try to find a good option. So yeah, that basically covers it. So I hope this can be helpful. I know a lot of people have a lot of questions when they're first, want to get their first lute. They don't know how to go about it. I certainly didn't. I don't think that information is really out there. So I hope you find this helpful. And, leave a comment if you have any questions, and happy looting.